Sairam, everybody. Thank you for joining the very first inaugural session with prayers and taking the blessings and presence of our beloved Bhagwan, our beloved Swami. We are very happy to start this forward-looking series. And for the very first session, we have somebody who is well known and very familiar, Mr. Satyajit Salian. A few lines of introduction. He joined Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning in 1991. Did his BSc, MSc, and then his MBA. That he passed out in 1998 batch. He then, of course, as all of us know, served our beloved Swami for long number of years, as he also worked with Sri Sathya Sai Central Trust. Thereafter, we all know the commencement of the Vidya Vahini project, which is taking Swami's integral education mission to schools across the country. After spending the founding years and building the basic foundation and structure upon which it continues to function, he then joined Tata Trusts, wherein he was the head of the education vertical. So over a span of 10 years, he has worked with individual students and teachers in rural school settings and has got the opportunity to work at the policy level at both state government level as well as the national government level. Currently, he is the Vice President of Learning Management Systems in Karkinos Healthcare Private Limited. With these few words of introduction and on a welcoming note, I now request the speaker, Brother Satyajit Salian, to take over. Over to you, brother.
Thank you, Manoj. A very warm welcome to all the brothers and sisters of here. And it's a great pleasure to be interacting. It's been a while since I've spoken in various fora, and it's always great to speak, reminisce about the great days of inspiration and vision that drove us all, and to share those thoughts, to share the passion that drives us all in the development sector is of great satisfaction. So what I'll do is I'll start with a little bit of reflection as to what are we doing here. This effort that Manoj has put in and some of the younger brothers have put in to bring us all together. He's been at it for more than a year now, trying to keep the energy of the development sector WhatsApp group running. And the logical next step has been this call, this webinar series. And I'm very proud of the youngsters who are envisioning things and trying to bring the convergence of thoughts, of ideas, of people, of like-minded hearts and minds together. So we hope that this really picks up and that we get a purpose. These become really purpose-driven interactions, purpose-driven engagements. So one question that I was reflecting upon and I want to throw to all of you also for reflection. I know it's a one-way traffic here in the webinar, but what is the purpose of the development sector? We are in the development sector. We are all purpose-driven people. We are always conscious about defining our purpose. The why aspect is very important to us. It is for all the other sectors also, but in the development sector, the importance that we give to purpose, to our vision statement, to clarify our theory of change, it's tremendous, is it not? So each of our organization has got a vision, has got a purpose. But what is the purpose of the development sector itself? Why are we working? Why are we working? Towards what are we working? Look at any vertical, right? Look at the education sector. Look at the healthcare vertical. Look at rural upliftment vertical, livelihoods, sustainable living, conservation, environment related work, animal care, civic society. There are a million things that we do. But what is the common factor that we are trying to achieve here? Right? Why are we working in the development sector? What are we chasing? What are we trying to accomplish? Why the struggle? Why those sleepless nights? Why do we go all out to collaborate with people? Why do you reach out to like-minded peoples? Why the heartburns and the sleepless nights? Why the challenge of funding? Why are we struggling so much to retain our employees? Why do we sacrifice or move away from those high-paying jobs and continue to work in the development sector? What inspires us? Why do we exist? So these were some of the reflections as I was thinking, preparing for this call, and not thinking about the purpose of these discussions itself. These were coming very strongly to me, right? And each of us, I'm sure, has thought about it sometime or the other, right? Some would have done it deeply, some would have done it fleetingly, some would have done it consciously, some subconsciously, some deliberately, right? Now telling that why do we exist? And some out of frustration, why do I exist, man? What the hell am I doing in this sector? Some out of inspiration, some out of exhaustion. Or what is the point of it all? There is too much of energy. But at whatever be the motivation for these discussions, for these thoughts, we, each one of us, in some way or the other, have thought about it. Some would have thought of it in a very, very articulate manner, right? Thinking that, okay, this is it. Some would have just, a vague string of words and thoughts telling that, this is what we are trying to achieve. This is a large purpose. This is a bigger purpose. But I'm sure each one of us have thought about it. What are we doing in the sector itself? We have some once in a while thought out of our sector, our small work, or the sector itself, not just education. I've thought beyond education, not just healthcare. I've thought beyond healthcare. What is the purpose of our work at all, right? If you really think about it, the common factor here is human development. All said and done, it's human. It's like a no-brainer. It's a human development that we're working towards. Right? We are in it for human development, and that's it. Even the conservation work, the animal care work, it's all also about human beings. It's about converting, making sure that we become a caring society. We become a caring species. We become nurturing as a species. Every single thing that we are doing in the development sector is about human development. So if human development is the purpose, right, if that is what we are doing, be in whatever way, in education, we are doing human development in a certain way. In healthcare, we are doing development in a certain way. In livelihoods, it is all said and done, the crux is human development. That's the unifying force. That's the thing that brings us all together as this group called the development sector group. That's the reason, in all these conferences and workshops that we come together, we have a common shared bonding and a culture where we relate to one another, and then say that, okay, we are working, and our struggles are the common. Our struggles, be it in healthcare, be it in educare, the struggles of working with individuals. Just a minute. What happened? My video is not working.
Can you once try switch off and switch on your video, or just angle the laptop?
Yeah,
it's better, slightly better now. Yes.
What happened? Was there a
somehow it was not clear. It was not clearly enough. Sorry for the.
Is it good now?
Still, it is a bit off.
Oh. Okay, but is my audio clear?
Audio is clear. Let's continue.
Right, as long as we are hearing, it's all right.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's the thought process. It's the sharing of the ideas that are more important. I was talking about the human development being the common unifying factor, right? Whatever work we are doing. Human development is the thing that brings us together, right? If you look at the inspiring vision statements of foundations and NGOs, right, big foundations, big NGOs, you'll always see a grand purpose, a grand purity, a beautiful purity of purpose, and it's a rallying cry, right? We're just trying to set a target. All of them, right? Like all lives have equal value, is what MSDF says. Everyone deserves opportunity. Everyone deserves opportunity. Is the simple thing of Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. Access to learning opportunities to every child is another vision statement. My own favorite, my own personal vision statement that drove me for 7 to 8 years was integral education for all, by all, right? Building resilient communities, one woman at a time. right? Better health and healthcare for people. So various visions, right? It's all about betterment. It's about people. It's about bringing together of 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 human of human development, right? Bringing together all resources to develop the to improve the ken of human beings, to ensure that we lead better lives, right? And the common thread here, and if you really look at human development, the common thread here is removing barriers. Is it not? We are all in the process, in the business of removing barriers to people's self-actualization. We are here to remove the barriers called lack of education, lack of access to education. We are here to remove the problem statement would be that I need to make sure that access to healthcare is a problem statement that we are looking at. We remove the barriers to the access to healthcare. Everything that we do are trying to remove the barriers, right? Removing obstacles that prevents the human being from thriving, removing obstacles that prevent humanity to express itself fully, right? That's what we are trying to do. And we, as the alumni of the Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, have heard this in a different language. We have heard the clarion call of our visionary master, our beloved Bhagwan, who says, you are divine and the purpose of your existence is to realize that divinity. How many times have we heard this, right? You are divine and the purpose of your existence is to realize that divinity in various ways, various times, various languages. We have been told this, in our 2, 5, 7, 14, 8, 17 years of education. Some of us have done 17 to 19 years of education there in the university, in the schooling system. We have heard this innumerable number of times that you are divine and the purpose of your existence is to realize that divinity. That's the holy grail, is it not? That's the vision that's to be chased. And you may sail, you may stumble, you may get stumped. There may be joys and sorrows. Those are the joys and the sorrows of the path. But the destination is fixed. That we need to make sure that we are self-actualized. We are able to achieve that sense of perfectness. We as individuals and we as a society. It's vision statements are that way, right? It's like a horizon there. We tend towards the horizon, but we never reach the horizon. And that's the vision statement that has been set for us. Divinizing oneself while divinizing humanity as a whole. Divinizing oneself while divinizing humanity. Is that then the purpose of the development sector? To make sure that we as individuals, present ourselves or expand our consciousness towards the most effulgent being that we can be. And we do that by working for removing the barriers and allowing the effulgence of others to come forth. If you really look at it, right, whatever work you're doing, any work, be it working for the inmates of a prison, be it giving social justice, be it giving those opportunities for livelihood, the things that dampen, the beautiful example that we would always hear is that the ember, the glowing ember, gives right to the ashes, which make the embers glow a little dimmer as those ashes cover it. So is our role to keep pushing away or blowing away those ashes so that those embers start glowing brighter and brighter, and we also start becoming effulgent human beings, to remove all obstacles that prevent humanity from expressing itself as divinity. Is that then the task set out for us in the development sector? And in parallel, first is to remove obstacles that prevent humanity from expressing itself as divinity. But in parallel, to remove all impediments, flaws, character traits that prevent oneself from fully expressing one's own divinity. Is that then our personal journey? That's a twin journey, right? Because you will become better at serving others only when we have removed those flaws and character traits. Flaws and characteristics. I'm using it as a joke, right? That was one beautiful joke I had said that in that Peanuts comic strip, the one guy he tells Chuck says, you call those flaws? Those are not flaws; those are character traits, right? So whatever it is, right? To whatever is preventing us from shining forth, are we removing them, right? If that indeed is the common clarion call that each one of us, for each one of us present here on this call, heard, if that is the call that we have heard, then should we be operationalizing that vision statement, right? Should that be our task? We are professionals. We are, in the development sector. We are, perfect. We are mastered the art of converting vision to mission, to strategy, to annual plans, to DPRs, to PIPs, to M&E frameworks and whatnot, to actual execution, right? Taking the vision to the execution. Should we then be using that expertise in this group to actually think about what is the common higher purpose in all our professional efforts? Should that be the tenor that we set for these talks and discussions and seminars? Should we be helping one another identify personal Waterloos, demons on our backs, monkey on our back, so that we are able to individually shine forth even better? Should we be working together to clarify, to revisit, to re-articulate our own institutional purposes in this light? Does that look like a good, good amount of time spent? Is it a good use of the time that we spend together to clarify our own roles, to clarify our own purpose in life, our personal journeys, to clarify the path of our personal journeys, as well as clarify our purpose within our organizations and whether they are aligned to a larger goal? So I think that was some reflection I thought I should give as part of this introductory talk, and then see whether we can set some kind of a task for ourselves. And see, the word divinity becomes too amorphous. It's like, when we were students, we used to get overwhelmed by the word of divinity and say that, no, that's too big a leap for us, common human beings to understand. But there are enough and more frameworks that have been created for us. One of the most musical frameworks is the one where all the attributes of divinity are spoken about, right? Always blissful, Brahmanandam, joyful, removed from all impurities, isolated from impurities, Kevalam, Jnanamurtim, the embodiment of knowledge beyond duality. There are no, see, these, if you really look at these things, if you look at these words in the perspective of your personal journey or in the perspective of the communities, right? Vast like the sky, right? Is a word. These are all poetic expressions of an aspiration that we as human beings should have, right? Focused on reality. Right? That is something. If you really apply these words, focused on reality, right? It's called Tattvamasyadi Laksham is what Swami says. If these words are well thought through, if we can focus on these words and then try to interpret that for our professional lives and our personal lives, there is a framework that is available for us to work towards. Right? One and only, constant, unshakable, a constant witness, beyond emotions, working with women's welfare, working with people who are looking at are battered in the households, right? Like, does the word beyond emotions, or does it make sense that you break those barriers of emotions and then stand forth as powerful individuals, the women folk that we work with? So do these words, what I'm exhorting the team here, exhorting the community here, is to pick up these words, pick up some of these words that we have heard in our childhood, in our college days, to really to see whether that is applicable to our professional life today, right? And so the music with which Swami used to say, the Nityanandam Paramasugadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatvitam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamasyadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimala Machalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Triguna Rahitam. I still remember that melody is in the ears. And can we actually use that as a framework? Or do we want a simpler framework? For me, what really worked was this, what I like to call the systems approach to life, another framework, right? Vyashti, Samashti, Srishti, Parameshti. Just like the finger is part of the palm is part of the hand, and the hand is part of the body. so also the individual is part of the society, society is part of nature, and nature is part of divinity. It's a framework that systems within systems, being part of the subsystems and subsystems of a larger system, right? And that oneness that Swami talks about, that concept of samashti was so inspiring to me, right? That my entire professional life has been about samashti thinking. It's about thinking of the oneness of humanity, oneness of the community. It's not community, right? It's oneness. It's samashti as an entity, as an organic living being. It's not the individual is a living being, but that samashti itself is a living being. And to think of the next level, that srishti is just one organic living being, and then to visualize the step beyond that, right? Whether these things help us to clarify our purpose in our journeys, in our professional lives, right? Whether we can use these frameworks to do that. And when I speak today about my own journey, I'll use some of these constructs to think, and especially the samashti construct, to think of how that helped me think in my own journey, right? So you all know that I was, as Manoj said, 91 I had joined, and on 15th of July 98 I joined the Central Trust. I was reporting directly to Swami. For all practical purposes, the role was that of an executive assistant. Right, got a fantastic ringside view of the master in action, right? How he would be hands-on about every small aspect of the trust, yet how he beautifully trusted and empowered the heads of the institutions, right? That complete knowledge, complete involvement, yet empowerment, right? That aspect, I think that these are, for especially for the senior brothers and sisters here, these are all important reflections in our professional lives, right? How do I keep a good tab about what's happening, yet encourage, empower, self-actualize my subordinates, right? That thought process was always there. So when we created the fellowship program, my focus was always on making sure that the fellows feel self-actualized, that they feel that there is ownership, complete ownership for the work that they do. Yet the responsibility of delivering quality to the school rested on us as the senior management, right? How do we bring that beautiful thing, just that ability to zoom in and zoom out, go to the microscopic level, yet being at the telescopic level, and looking at the stars and the visions. Now there was I remember 2000, 2001, I think 2000, 99, 2000, when the plans of this Bangalore Super Speciality Hospital was being created. There was a meeting, and Swami was chairing that meeting in the guest room of Trey Vrindavan. And I was peeping in from the side door, and Swami was asking questions about what is this room for, giving suggestions. Should the entrance not be like this? There was the whole the facade of the building, etc., was being shown. The detailed diagrams were being shown, and they were all the engineers, the doctors. They were asking inputs. Should the operation theaters be here? Should it not be here? Very, very involved discussions, right? And he is giving that overview of the whole thing. Then he breaks out of there, comes inside, asks me, is the tea ready? Are the pakoras hot enough? Have you brought coffee without sugar? Have you brought sugar separately? Right? Zoomed in to the macro thing about things, and then again zooms out of here, goes back and changes. And each of us professionally, have gone through these journeys, right? The ability to be able to zoom in and zoom out, I think is an important personal journey for us. And how do we do that seamlessly, and how do we not micromanage, and at the same time how do we keep in touch with everything that's happening? These are all important tasks, and so those years of that blessed experience of watching the master in action, watching the inspiration of the people around him, watching him inspire and rally an entire international organization towards a cause, right? He was not the one beautiful thing that we need to learn here is that the master does not align people to him. He aligns people to a vision, right? That's the aspect. To how do we take away the messages of aligning a following, aligning volunteers, aligning your team towards a larger purpose, towards vision. These are all important reflections for us, and that is something that we got to see. I'll speak about my biggest passion for 7 years that became my lifeline after Swami's Samadhi and the Vidyavani program. The energy that we could feel, the energy that the entire organization felt of that program was unbelievable. The 90th birthday is an unforgettable experience of 2,000 plus children and teachers and adults and volunteers coming in and contributing the 5th anniversary. I try to speak about that journey with using some principles, right, or that we followed. One was always be focused on the end beneficiary, right? I mean, never ever move away from that focus. So there was a big push for me to create an organization chart, right? And there were multiple organization charts that were shown to us, and we started thinking from keeping larger goals, and then we were working with professionals like TVS. TVS organization, TVS Motors, they were guiding us and they were telling me, you have to have an organization. Without an organization chart, you will never be able to reach scale. Right? And we realized that we do not want to put an organization chart like that. Right? We wanted to make sure that we don't want to create that hierarchical system. So our organization chart was all about the child in the center. Right? We kept a round organization chart. I don't know, many of you must have seen that. I do not want to go into presentation mode. I want to just keep it a free-flowing discussion. With the child in the center, the child covered, supported by the teacher, the parent, and the school, right? And that group of the teacher and the student in the center, the teacher, parent, and the school, supported by our volunteers, and then comes all our specialized teams, right? The content team, the training team, the tech team, and whatnot, planning team, etc. So we realized that all of us have to deliver to the student, right? There is no hierarchy here, right? So when we create an organization chart that way, all our focus is towards the end beneficiary. So probably that's a very important principle in the development sector, and maybe for any other sector. And to make sure that it is in the center, it is that divinity that we are serving. That child in the center is the divinity that we are serving, and that is the entire garland that gets created for serving that divinity. Right? It's an important aspect. Another principle of this, keeping the end beneficiary focus is empower. Do not spoon feed. Right? It was very important for us that though we were creating lesson plans for the teachers, we would always make sure that the teachers themselves would contribute back to the lesson plan. So teachers are not spoon-fed. Teachers are contributors. Teachers are engaged in the whole process, right? And very, very importantly, this came to light very, very strongly during the COVID situation in Tata Trust, and the national response during COVID for the education, right? The principle here is focus on strengthening the immediate support system. Right? The focus should be on strengthening the immediate support system for the child, for the beneficiary, and not to plan to provide everything from the center. What was being visualized, and again that was hitting failure, was that the state government would visualize, how do I send an SMS directly to the students? How do I make sure that the lesson plans or the study materials are reaching directly to the students? What was being missed out here was that there is a teacher down there who is, through telephone, she is in contact with the students, with the parents, with the child's parents. That was being missed out in state after state, right? To visualize that there is an endpoint, there is a government machinery, there is the government itself was not visualizing it. Government was trying to focus on a tech solution. Tech solution independently doesn't work. A tech solution has to make the best use of the ground forces, right? The book, I would very strongly recommend the book called Digital Nation by the chairman of Tata Sons, Chandrasekaran. It visualizes that concept of digital and phygital, right? Physical and digital. Right? They call it Bridgital nation, right? The bridge between the physical, between the IT sector and the physical world. It's a very powerful thing, and we in the organization in Vidyavahini, we always used to ensure that we are not supporting the teacher. I would insist that none of the volunteers would enter the class. Volunteers will only support the teacher, and the teacher is the one who would shine in the eyes of the teacher, eyes of the student. These are all important principles, right? We never undermine the teacher. In education, that's very important. We never undermine the ground staff who will continue to serve after the volunteers have left. So after our staff members of the organization, whichever organization you are working with, after they have left, it is the ground staff that will continue to be working there. Right, I'll just check for time. I've got about 10-15 minutes more. Second principle is think samashti, right? That was one of the most beautiful things. So that's why the vision statement of Vidyavahini was integral education for all, by all. When you look at a problem statement, the problem statement looks daunting, but the moment you start thinking samashti, right, telling that it is not me who is solving the problem, it is not who or me that is solving the problem, it is the entire community that is solving the problem. It's all about ensuring that we create that united front. We created one organic unit. Again, the samashti is not about community, it is about one organic being. Right? So when we start thinking samashti, it is something to be done for all, but it will be done by all. So how do I make sure that everybody's role is clarified? Thinking of the volunteers as much as the beneficiaries. What does the volunteer go through? What does your ground staff go through when he or she is serving the beneficiaries? What is making him or her tick, right? What kind of frameworks do you create for a seamless and synergistic and safe engagement? These were the words that we had used: seamless, synergistic, and safe engagement, right? How do we break barriers? Everything is about breaking barriers. It's about creating that oneness of existence. Right, the collaboration of ideas, people, and technology. We have to make sure ideas come together. Demystify jargons. Jargons are a big barrier. Right, have a clear framework. Right? We had that IIEP by 4C framework. Within 15 minutes, we could communicate the IIEP 4C framework to a new crowd, to teachers, and we could remove that framework from the blackboard, from the PowerPoint. And then using code, we could ask, we could figure out whether the teachers have understood that framework or not. It was a 15-minute articulation, and they would be with us, right? A framework is very important. Communication of ideas is very important. I think all of us know. I think, and these are all some important principles that we're talking about. Collaboration of people, right? We had one framework. I think that worked powerfully for us. What is in it me? We used to have this role play. What is in it for me? Ask the principal. What is in it for me? Ask the block education officer. What is in it for me? Ask the student. Unless we empathize with the beneficiary, unless we empathize with the last mile caregiver, we will not be able to get the collaboration of people meaningfully. And of course, collaboration of technology, collaboration of ideas, people, and technology was the framework that we had created for Vidyavahini. And technology, of course, you have to think of convergence, interoperability, etc., right from the very beginning. So the first two principles I spoke about was stay focused on the end beneficiary, think samashti. The third point here is think at scale. Right? You have to think at scale right from the beginning. You have to be beneficiary focused, but at the same time, your organization should be thought of in such a way that we are able to scale. The moment we set the target, we were working with 3 schools. In 2010, we were working with 3 schools. By 2011, we were in about 10 schools. Then for 90th birthday, we kept a target of 90 schools. That was a stretch, right? 10 schools to 90 schools is a 9-fold increase in 4 years. But for the 95th birthday, we had already set a target of 950 schools. Adding a 0 every 5 years was the target that we had set. At the moment we start thinking from that perspective, I know there are many questions from the youngsters telling that how do we start thinking about should we be doing solving problems at locally? Should we be thinking about big programs, big solutions, etc.? These questions were asked, and I'm sure all of us keep wrestling with these questions. Should I be solving for scale? Should I be solving for the micro communities that we are working with? Right. So we need to make sure that we work with the system. I very, very strongly believe that we should work with the system, and whatever it takes to do that, that's important. One very important thing that worked for us was to create work packages, right? Make sure you clarify what each volunteer needs to do. If you have to think at scale, it has to be, again, by all for all. It's a samashti thinking. And our concept was atomic seva to create sustainable change. Atomic seva to create sustainable change. One small act, but that act is so well designed, that act which a volunteer does is so well designed and so well integrated into the part of the whole system that it creates sustainable change, right? So it gives satisfaction to the volunteer for having completed a task, yet it is an important integral part of the larger picture. And need to think on those lines. And also very important for the youngsters, right, to think of in terms of maturity models, right? Do not think of, you know that you have to deliver something at scale, but know that you will be doing that 5 years down the line. Do not think from today that you will be delivering. So you create your steps. What is your maturity level 1? What's 2, 3, 4, 5? When you think that, then you are not scared. You're not overawed by the magnitude of the problem. You're saying that first year we are only going to be doing this. Second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year. That's how we'll start expanding our work. This is, please, for the younger brothers and sisters. Keep thinking, learn, keep reading up that CMM capability maturity model, and learn how do you expand your scope, right? And of course, for me, what was passionate was that all the work that we were doing came from personal experience, right? That impact of integral education on me personally, right? I came as a nervous wreck from Mumbai, right? Backbencher shouting from the back, but never had the courage to stand in front of the teacher and stand and talk. Never being able to do public speaking or there's no character, right? The ability to stand up and talk. All that thing came because of the multiple interventions that I got in the college, right? It's the dramatics, the dance, the drama, the sports, the massive sports meet party, being part of that huge system. The way it opens up a child's mind, right? So the more you envision, the more you immerse yourself in or the more you work in alignment with your personal experiences, your family experiences, the more empathy you will find with the people that you work with, the communities. And without empathy, development sector doesn't work, right? It is that you all know about that. And what I really realized was that, when there is a purity of vision, it will always find acceptance. It will expand, right? The purity of vision is important, right? Just coming to very quickly to my experience with the Tata Trust. That gave me a stage for 3.5 years that I worked there. That gave me a massive stage, right? And to really test out the principles, the depth that we had gone into, the passion, the depth, the engagement, the immersion that we got in Vidyavahini. Now, this was a scale to really look at the breadth, the vastness, the expansion of that thing, right? And that's where I realized that the purity of vision will always find acceptance anywhere. So, I'll talk about some of the experiences there. But what we learned from at Tata Trust was to avoid, this is for the seniors now, right? I know I'm talking for the seniors, like crazy, be passionate, be paranoid about avoiding mission drift, right? Do not allow mission drift. There will be always pulls and pushes to ask, let's do this also, let's do that also. The crowd, the end beneficiary is asking this, we should do this also, that also. Never do that. I would say find a partner, find the right collaboration to do that, but do not allow you to allow mission drift, because we will not do our job well, and we will blotch the work that we are taking up, because we have to stick to our core competencies. Second thing that we learned was think systemic. You have to think systemic. Systemic thinking is not easy. To align with a working or not working so well government machinery is not easy, but there is a machinery. That machinery is important to be engaged with, because otherwise you'll end up creating parallel systems. There is always insatisfaction, especially for a trust like the Tata Trust. There is always a thing that, okay, we'll create our own 100 schools or 200 schools, and we'll do the best for these students. Right? I had seen programs where the amount of program that the amount of money that would go into a 100 school program, we could complete an entire state when we engage with the system. But the engagement methodology is different. The kind of employment, the kind of HR that you create is different. The kind of processes that you create are different. This, again, I'm talking to the seniors here, and the juniors should be listening in very carefully as they come to senior leadership roles. Do not create parallel systems, right? So just to give an example of what we did in the Tata Trust, we had the vision, we created the vision, articulated the vision of quality education for all, right? And when we spoke about quality education for all, we broke down that vision into 4 teams. Delivery of that vision was the responsibility of 4 teams. One team was talking about deepening learning, right? This is everything that happens in the classroom, everything that happens inside the classroom, the interaction between the teacher, student, the pedagogy, the new techniques that comes in, the new instruments that can be used, the new tablet based things, the AI thing that is coming in, all those things, quality education, deepening learning. How do I deepen the learning? That team was focused only on the best research, making sure that everything that needs to happen, Khan Academy would our relationship with Khan Academy. How do you fine tune Khan Academy's work? How do you create better lesson plans? That is the deepening learning team. Then there was another team which is about developing teachers, right? The teacher in the deepening learning, the teacher is the center of attention in the classroom. But in developing teachers, the teacher is part of the community, right? So this team starts thinking about, how do I make teachers talk to one another? How do I do the teacher training? How do I make sure that the whole teacher training is interesting? How do I measure the impact of teachers, right? These 2 teams, deepening learning and developing teachers teams, these 2 teams were focused on the vision, quality education, the quality education part of the vision, right? And the whole vision is quality education for all, right? The for all part, we had 2 more teams. One team is called the broadening access team. This team is, how we used to articulate was, how we articulated about that team was that this is the sociological, the team that solves sociological problems, right? All the societal problems, all the problems that prevents the child from coming to the school, migration related problems, the caste related problems, tribal problems, flood challenges, learning deficiency, language barriers, right? Cultural barriers, various things, all the problems that prevent a child from coming into the school system and consume meaningfully all that we have created with deepening learning and developing teachers. That problems were solved by the broadening access. I don't want the deepening learning team to focus on the broadening access challenges, because that's a social problem that needs to be solved differently, right? So that was the for all part. So to how do you broaden, how do you bring more people into the education system? That's the for all part. The other aspect of for all is making sure it goes at scale, and that was focused by a team called strengthening systems. And this system, this team is, we have Naveen sitting in front of me. He was part of that team, which sat in the government offices, understood how the government machinery works. Right, I do not worry too much whether Naveen can solve solve the classroom pedagogy problems. I want to make sure that he is able to solve the relationship issues with the IAS officers and the next in line and the next in run. So for the seniors who are visualizing these things, I think it's important for us to create teams that are specialized, and then make sure, like mad, make sure that they work together. Right? You have to make specialization and collaboration. That was a big learning for me in the Tata Trust. And I'll very quickly wind up now with just a few examples of where I found satisfaction of taking forward the vision of the work that we had started in Vidyavahini through Tata Trust. Right? The work that we continued in Tata Trust, the vision of integral education. Diksha was a very, very satisfying experience, right? Diksha was where I got an opportunity to sit at the steering committee of the Diksha of the Diksha steering committee at the MHRD, right, which was headed directly by the chairperson of CBSE, who is currently the principal secretary education, right? Ms. Anita Karwal, a fantastic lady, a lady with a vision, and the energy with which she drove the Diksha program was unbelievable. And got a chance to work with the fantastic people from organizations like Central Square Foundation, but more importantly, EkStep, which has a vision of actually creating the pipeline that allows quality education to flow to the farthest corners of the country, right? And the joy that I got was that all our work, the 7-8 years of work that Swami made us make the presentation to Mr. Ratan Tata way back in 2010, in July 2010, and the work that we had done with TCS for creating the lesson plan creation thought process, the volunteering, how volunteers give small contributions to this, to the lesson plans, how we create a lesson plan in small modular form, all those things. That was the exact same replica that we could suggest to the Diksha steering committee. Right? I made a presentation to the Diksha steering committee, to the principal secretary, on those lines, telling that how do we visualize the information, the knowledge being given to the teacher at the right time, at the right doses, how she should get access to just a small bit when she is accessing Diksha platform in the classroom, how she should get a little bit more when she is doing it outside the classroom, in off school hours, and how she should get a more detailed reading and more intense reading on a weekend, right? So how do you visualize the teacher's life cycle, and teachers, a week in the life of a teacher, and then align content to that? So these were very, very well received. These presentations from us was very well received. And today, when we see even the Vidyavahini content being on the Diksha platform, it's a great satisfaction to see that, that the decade-long work that the volunteers of Swami's organizations had done today is finding its fulfillment in a national platform. So that was a great satisfaction for me. Another beautiful thing was our work with Badi Parivartana. This was Badi Parivartana, was Badi in Telugu stands for school, the school transformation program in Andhra Pradesh. We worked with the state government, we worked with the principal secretary, with the Commissioner of School Education in AP to create their 10-year vision, right? The Vision 2029, Vision 2030. And what we were able to do was that the vision statement of Andhra was happy, resilient, fulfilled, and responsible children who are future ready, right? That's the vision statement. Happy, resilient, fulfilled, and responsible. Call it HRFR. Happy, resilient, fulfilled, and responsible children who are future ready. I mean, you could do your internal mapping to the insightful, inspiring, enjoyable, participatory IIEP framework of trusts of the Vidyavahini, right? So the happiness, the fulfillment, the resilience, the values aspect, the inspiration, the responsibility is the participative part, IIEP, that mapping has done. The deep depth of thinking of Vidyavahini, right? We were able to meaningfully contribute into the Badi Parivartana program. Another satisfying thing was a work with Goa, where we created a quality framework and the ability to for the government to do quality assessment in all the 850 odd schools in Goa. Right? That was a fantastic thing, and we were able to identify an organization, appreciate the quality of work that this organization Adhyayan does, because we in Vidyavahini had created that framework for taking a school from, we used to have a framework called entering to mentoring, right? How do you enter Vidyavahini at a level and then end up becoming a mentoring school? And what are the parameters that takes you a level? So again, as I was talking earlier to the youngsters, that maturity model, we have to visualize that maturity model was what worked in the school's framework. And that was something that today it's become a quality cell within the Goa department, right? And finally, one last satisfaction just before I put down my papers was the completion of the CBSE experiential learning course, right? We created an entire course for CBSE which will on experiential learning, on the principles that we have always spoken about in Vidyavahini, and the that it is not about rote learning, it is about experiential learning. That entire course was created. It is on the Diksha platform. Please search for that course, experiential learning course. It is so beautiful and so satisfying that this course would eventually be taken by nearly 10 million teachers, about 10 lakh teachers, about 1 million teachers of CBSE, right? So it's a great satisfaction to have to be able to do this. So with that kind of a satisfaction, on Swami's 95th birthday on 23rd November, I put down my papers with the Tata Trust, having done, on Swami's 85th birthday was the inauguration of the Vidyavani program on that grand stage of Swami's 85th birthday. And on 95th birthday, I felt that such an immense sense of satisfaction that, offered my pranams to the master and put down my papers. And today we're working with in the healthcare sector. Educare is done now. Healthcare. Let's see what life has got for me. And it's a beautiful organization that we're working in. The same energy of that we felt in Vidyavani. That same energy we are feeling here in this organization. It's about cancer care, and we'll speak a little bit later. I think I've gone about 5 minutes extra, but this is basically the story and the joy of having worked. Manoj, sorry for a little bit of an excess time, and yeah.
Thank you, brother, for this wonderful session. And by being the by being the speaker for the inaugural session, you get these additional liberties of extending time, so you don't have to apologize. So I think I'm guessing you're thinking, why weren't you told earlier about it? Then you would have probably
yes. And I'm also seeing that you're already threatening the next speaker. That's nice.
Not a problem. When we sent out the form inviting registrations, we received over 70 odd questions, and we studied them and categorized them into various groups. We have distilled them to 3 questions. I will start with the first one that pertain to understanding Indian education system as a whole. The person who asked the question acknowledged the inherent diversity in terms of culture, in terms of geography, in terms of language, in terms of the purpose that one wants to achieve. The pursuit for going through education system is so diverse. And today now we are talking of the new education policy. So we are at the threshold point. Everybody seems to think that the past is behind us, the colonialization past is behind us, and now finally we have our own version of what should education truly mean. So having got a chance to work with state governments and national governments, what would be your take on, are we ready for this shift? What do you think are some of the strengths of the system? What do you think are some of the things that will be extremely challenging for us to overcome and still be able to meet the desired future?
Of course, our strength is creating policy. Right? That is always a great strength. And
I guess that is also.
Sorry.
I guess that is also the fear that we stop at policy.
Yeah, that's the thing. So that was a tongue in the cheek. But what I'm seeing is that in many states, the focus on implementation is coming well. Right. I was very pleased to see the acceptance and the innovation of Diksha in Assam. Right. Assam came down as a black horse came from behind. UP's adoption was extraordinarily good. The empowerment of the teachers, and we always have a envisionment telling that okay, that's nothing is happening in the state kind of a state. But then when you see one level down, when we see beyond the bureaucracy, when you see the teachers, the passion of the teachers, the erudition of the teachers, right? I have great confidence that if you break the unnecessary bureaucracy, right? One of the biggest challenges of the education system is that there are 2 chains of command. One is the chain of command of the department and the block education officer and those kinds of things. Other is the chain of command of the SCRT and the district institute of education and technology, and so pedagogical chain comes through the SCRT, but the administrative chain comes to the department of school education, etc. And they only meet at the principal secretary's level. So one of the most beautiful points that I saw in this policy is the school complexes. Right, the idea of a school complex is to create the headmaster of a high school as the complex head, and that being the administrative and the pedagogical head for about 10 to 15 primary schools or other similar schools around. Right, there are pros and cons of that. There is a lot of debate whether a high school teacher principal would understand the nuances of a primary school, and those things are there. But the idea is that we are trying to the idea is to remove one layer of bureaucracy here and bring in that place. They are trying to bring in both pedagogical and administrative control. Right, so that is a very powerful thing. And many foundations, we had actually, as part of Tata Trust, I had brought in many like-minded people to think on that as the area of intervention for NGOs, right, and foundations. That the school complexes is a very, very powerful change agent. and again, to think, and that becomes the implementation point. And if that implementation is delegated to that level, and within the big principles, if innovation is allowed at that level, that was a very, very strong recommendation from one of the former heads of NIPA, and he gave what's his name, Professor. I'm not getting the name, sorry, but that's a very, very powerful approach, that innovation should be part of that. NEP can be a policy, but it cannot be a diktat that can come from top. It will have to be created on the ground. I think there is reasonable understanding amongst the people, administrators, that I've heard, to give that kind of a leeway. So I'm very, very positive about this NEP being a game changer. We have got technology as a very important thing. This is the first national education policy in the tech after the 90s, right? When the tech boom started, this is the first tech-based policy. So I'm very, very positive about the NEP and its possibilities of implementation. Looking forward to reading from outside the ring now, and looking forward to seeing this.
Everybody is hopeful that we will see a new schooling system in India given the NEP at play. And also, yes, Mr. Prime Minister's comment that next to health, education is now going to get the highest focus, both in terms of his priority as well as the budgetary allocation. Going, yes, to the next question, many expressed interest to know your view about the role of development impact bonds, or DIBs as it is commonly known. Yep. There is return on investment, there is outcome linked payback, and so much conversations around it. And if I'm not wrong, at some point I also thought you thought about it very favorably. So definitely keen to know that despite so much criticism against it, or maybe I'm just taking the other side, I shouldn't do that, but nevertheless want you to share your thoughts about what role it has to play.
See, development impact bond is all about the quality of outcomes, right? It brings in a tremendous discipline in the outcomes, right? And the beauty of a development impact bond is that, again, it allows for innovation. It does not define. So there are two types of funding. One is a grant funding, and that grant funding would give you line item wise. You were in Tata Trust, and I also was in Tata Trust. We would give line item by line item expense, that you will be doing this and this only. If they find something changing on the ground situation, then they have to come back and do change and budgetary changes. There's no scope for innovation. Whereas outcome funds, development impact bonds, are outcome focused. They tell that do whatever you want within the cap. Do whatever you want. Put your additional resources. I don't care. Do whatever you want, but get me the outcomes. Right? So that's a different paradigm. It is focused on outcomes. Now the challenge of the development impact bond, especially in education, is that the definition of outcomes are very shallow. Right? I find that we can only do literacy numeracy. And I had gone to some of the sites where we were implementing the development impact bonds, and what I found was in that school there was a thriving energy. Right, there were children who were performing at a different level. The children were not talking, narrating poems. The children were acting role plays. There was so much of social emotional development that was happening in the child. But when we see the outcomes, we are only looking at numeracy and literacy. Are they doing better in maths? Are they doing, because that is easily measurable. Right? So unless the outcomes are well defined, but now just again to see what are the developments happening, there is a consortium. There's an entire consortium, which is there are multiple participants, Omidyar Foundation, Michael and Susan Foundation. We were part of it for some time, but then Tata Trust pulled out of that. These organizations are working towards creating a metric for social emotional development. And if a meaningful metric, measurable metric of social emotional development does emerge, and it is tested, then eventually funding will start coming on those metrics, right? All said and done, development impact bond is, I like the discipline part of it. So in a nutshell, I like the discipline that it brings, because if I don't, and again, it de-risks the NGO. Okay? The NGO doesn't, if something goes wrong, the NGO is not penalized. It is the risk investor who has put so the NGO is de-risked. So economically, it makes the model has got tremendous merit. Only the outcomes is something that I am not convinced about. But for other things where outcomes are very, very clear, right? They, for sanitation and wash area, right? The number of bathrooms can always be counted, right? So it's good whether you're done or not. So development impact bonds has got its pros and cons.
Okay. Yeah. So I think very soon probably we will have something called as MDIBs, Modified Development Impact Bonds, something to settle the score between those who are for it and those who are against it. I think it will naturally evolve and it will find itself fitting by the skill sector.
It's already happening. There are multiple new, and see that's the innovation, that's the space. The one thing that I like about that is that it is bringing in intellectuals, finance biz kids. It's bringing into the development sector. They are finding it greatly satisfying to structure things meaningfully. That's a great satisfaction. I met Saurabh, who works for Social Finance India. Excellent youngster, right? Is from IDFC. He is now moved here and is doing fantastic work. Kundan is one of our fellows who is now finding a lot of passion in the work. He's the financial biz kid, right? He's structuring bonds and etc. So it is bringing in good professionals, and we always are in the development sector. We are always in dearth of good professionals. If this brings in one more, good-hearted youngsters into the sector, so be it. Keep the watch on the outcomes.
Of course. There's yet another question. Given that education to a certain extent is what the state would want the citizens to adopt, and at the same time there are individual expectations associated towards linking on the cultural side of things. So there is this negotiation between what we want the masses to be educated upon and what the masses want to be educated in. So how is this outsider's view and the insider's need negotiated when it comes to education? Can we have a standardized approach? We see many technological platforms-based approach that assumes that takes the view that this is the bare minimum that the whole country should have. Yet there is the other view saying that education is very personal, it is cultural, it has its roots in religion, family, etc. So when it is the subject matter of the state, but NGOs have to work with communities, how does one negotiate this last mile interactions of outsiders' view for the beneficiaries and beneficiaries' own expectations from the system?
So what you spoke about the state and the NGOs, that same tension exists between the center and the states. Right? So the center wants to streamline things in a certain manner, and the state. So what I've seen in Diksha, for example, is that though there are certain guiding principles that are important, that needs to be sent forward as diktats, the states have a great amount of say. They design their Diksha platform the way they want. The content that is uploaded on Diksha is created by the state. So to that extent, that role is available for the states. Now, does that devolve that? Does it go one level lower to the schools or no? That is something that has it has got its own pros and cons, right? There are if what from the on the two sides of the spectrum, one is complete autonomy to the school, that complete agency to the school or the teacher or the student, right? To other side, where is complete autocracy, right? That it needs to be there. So what is the sweet spot? That is a question that even I have not been able to resolve, right? I've been wondering, because there are pros and cons of both sides. I mean, there are advantages of driving down, because at least the basic minimum is going to be achieved, right? Whereas here you can create wonderful learning experience for the child, but it always has the challenge of not meeting national objectives, not meeting the larger objectives of the education system, which has been agreed upon as a democratic this thing. So it's the same discussion, right? Whether power is there at the center or the state or the district or the panchayat. The same thing happens within the education system also. So it is the back and forth. It is how the NGOs operate in this world, is that you show best practices. So always I've seen broad-minded secretaries and even district education officers allowing small pilots of NGOs to happen, and listening in very, very keenly about new things that are happening, and what is seen as a monolith institution telling that, okay, it is a bureaucracy, it doesn't budge in its way. That is not the case. I see those individuals, the collectors, coming and watching, and then pitching that to the education secretary. I've seen district education officers speaking to the regional directors and going all the way up to the commissioner of school education. It has got its own feedback loop. That's why I'm saying it is very important for NGOs to start visualizing systemically. They have to understand where the button is. Otherwise, they're trying to push the wheel. You don't push the wheel. You go and press the accelerator. Right? You should know who's got the key and where the accelerator lies. So that aspect is very important for all of us who are working in the development sector to ensure, to understand where the ignition key is. So that's why that strengthening systems team is very important. That thought process is completely different. They think policy, they think how do you change policy, how do you interact, how do you develop relationship with the district education officer, with the block education officer, what does it take to convince the block education officer, how do you sit patiently for 4 hours outside the secretary's office, right? So it's not about how well you teach in the class, it's about the patience to doggedly and that's an important skill in the development sector. I have to very, very clearly say that your responsibility as a strengthening systems team is to make sure that our relationship with the government, that entire hierarchy is pakka. You will not be measured for pedagogical outcomes. You'll be measured for the relationship. We need to create metrics for that relationship. How many meetings happened on time? So actually, in the project implementation plan, or in the things that we used to measure in the M&E section, the things were how many meetings happened on time, how many items of the minutes were actually implemented, right? That is the metric. Right? Somebody sneezes at it, telling that what nonsense are you measuring? There is no outcome. These are all building blocks to an outcome. I think that patience is very important, and that envisionment is very important for us to do this. Long answer, sorry.
No, but very helpful. What we did like in your approach is you clearly had some part of your talk for the youngsters and some part of the talk for those who have white hair. I think you did mention about a couple of resources that will be good for youngsters. Some resources such as CMM and some books that you did suggest to understand the role of technology and its integration with physical on-ground resources. Also, one question from the audience was, similarly, would you have any suggestions with respect to DIBs? Any book or any particular resource, website or book that you would suggest to get deeper understanding.
We have a alumnus who is working specifically in this. I direct that question to Kundan. I don't know whether he's in call, but Kundan is the person who should give this thing. Kundan, he was a fellowship scholar.
Very much. He was very much. I think probably just left a few minutes ago. But that gives us a cue as to lineup of speakers we anyway need to prepare for subsequent sessions. We can definitely reach out to Kundan for an exclusive session on DIBs.
Yes. Let me know if you want somebody else also to come join him, Saurabh or somebody. We can get people to talk.
Definitely. So with this, we kind of come to the end of the session 1. It's very, very satisfying that we have been able to commence this series. Some apologies with respect to the audio quality, so some of them did face. But we will definitely have this video recording up on a new YouTube channel that's been created specifically to host this. And to all the audience, we will have a mix of young and old, women and men coming onto this platform. For years, we have drawn inspiration from TED Talks, but I think it's time to draw inspiration from within our own community. And as a short form for development, we have set it as Dev Talks. And all of you will see extremely energizing sessions, reflective sessions. And thankful to Brother Satyajit for having inaugurated this series and seek his continuous guidance to ensure that we think 5 years ahead as to what this series should look like. Probably it should be at a state level or a national level stage. Some of these sessions should go on to show the difference that alumni of SSS IHL can make in the development sector, given the master under whose guidance we have all been nurtured and cared for. With these few words, thanking you once again. If there's last 2 lines that you would like to convey to the audience today.
No, I'm just happy that who will be the elder who will be speaking next now that the youngsters have finished the first call. So, so anyway, but jokes apart, fantastic vision, fantastic effort. I know it takes a lot of energy to manage the time of people who don't stick to their original commitment, who have to have certain travels, etc. My apologies for not sticking to the last week's schedule, but we were in a train to Latur on that evening. But it was a pleasure. Thank you for engaging deeply. I would like to engage if required for prepping the next talks and bouncing ideas. I think some of the seniors also should join in and make sure that we bring out very, very high quality discussions here. Thanks, Manoj, for taking this initiative.
Thank you. We will thank you once again on behalf of all the participants, on behalf of the coordinating team as well. With prayers to Swami and seeking his blessings and guidance as always, we bring this first session to a close. Sai Ram, everybody.
Thank you, Sai Ram. How do you disconnect?